And this is the type of issue that will divide the community along color lines. It will bring about a confrontation that only hardens attitudes and hardens views, and it doesn't really provide the basis for settling the dispute.
In other words, you want to keep it a union affair.
We want to keep it a union affair, but we know by the same token, if we can't resolve it as a union, then obviously we're going to start to move to mobilize community support.
Mr. Rizzi, is there any attempt to get this hospital thing? I hate to keep coming back to that, but I told you that night it seemed like we're playing the same drama over again almost. Is there any attempt to get this thing in the hospital settled now before the Ray trial begins, on the theory that the Ray trial itself will be a...
We've been trying desperately to get it solved.
But I mean, does the Ray trial itself enter into your thinking on that at all?
To be perfectly honest, it doesn't enter into our thinking to the degree that it affects the issues involved. It affects the manner in which we sort of wage the struggle. We're well aware of the fact that all kinds of attitudes exist now and will become more sharply focused as we approach the date of trial.
Yes.
We would not want to have this type of thing going on downtown or marches in the street during this time, because even though we can discipline our people, we're not able to control other people and have no responsibility for control on either side of the fight.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be the focus of that kind of a confrontation. And even though we for instance, have some large-scale arguments with the police department of the city of Memphis, we're not trying to provoke a confrontation with them.
Okay, let me skip back in. So
right,
using one strike to the other.
Yeah, we could get back where we left off, again, to finally resolve, at least from your point of view, to give you full leeway to say what you want about the accusation that this was a premeditated part of a premeditated national plan.
No, it wasn't. The point I was going to make about, for instance, immediately after the situation was resolved here, the things that took place in other areas. The issues and the unity and the glamour, if you will, tragedy and triumph that came out of the Memphis situation certainly affected other men in like areas of work across the country. The national press, national focus that it was given, and worldwide attention that it was given, said that in effect that some 1,200 or 1,300 men here in Memphis were actually heroes. Regardless of the amount of sacrifice that they made, they stood up and stood together for some 2 months with all these personal sacrifices and individual sacrifices that went into it, and challenged the administration and challenged the city, and eventually won. This became the pattern.
So obviously you had no way of predicting this.
No, well, we could have said what was going to happen because of the militancy that was being showed. As a matter of fact, we said it much earlier than it actually took place. We said before the strike was ended that we're going to have a wave of these types of things around the country, because the conditions here in Memphis are not unique to Memphis, and that employees will understand, the need for unity in whatever their pursuits are going to be. And that's what we had in St. Petersburg, that's what we had in Ciampa, Miami, Atlanta, Baltimore, Charlotte, and all these places.
But you had no way of knowing on February 11th that starting February 12th there would evolve the drama and all the things that you said that happened in Memphis.
No.
So obviously the fact that it did happen was the thing that propelled the other things to happen.
Well, we had here sort of a raw display of the attitudes of, for instance, a southern city. We kept, I wouldn't say pleading, but requesting all the way through that thing that we sit down at the table and negotiate the differences and wind up with some kind of a settlement to the thing that would get people back to work. Yet we saw a mayor of a city who was more concerned with image than settling the problem. And we saw all of the forces in the so-called white establishment turn their wrath against the employees who had the least strength, and said for them to capitulate so that the problem can be solved, which is sort of the typical thing that happens. Rather than them to address themselves to the one who can solve it and has the greatest ability to solve it, they'll address it to the one who's the weakest.
Well, now, when you first came in early in February then, or when you first went to the Union Hall, were you impressed by the men themselves at that point? Did it look like they were going to be able to hold? Did it look like the unity was solid among them?
Yes, it did. It was a very unique thing. And I've seen some membership meetings, over the course of the years, but there was a different feeling with these men than you would normally see at a union meeting. There was sort of a blind belief that the union and their goals were right for them, and it was through these things and their determination to stick with it that was going to produce a victory. And bear in mind that a victory, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. They felt that as long as they stood together, that everything in the end was going to come out right, regardless of what they had to go through in the meantime. And they felt that every day the thing was going to be settled the next day. And it was a thing where they had just committed themselves to a fight, and there wasn't anything that was going to change their minds or turn them around.